the things that happened in 2018 is that we had a record number of women run for office and actually win office. And, you know, we keep calling different things the year of the woman. The year of the woman was also 1992, which was when you had this record number of black women run, including you had a black, woman senator for the first time. You had a lot of stuff happen that drove a lot of women into office, along with Bill Clinton.
Did Maxine Waters get in
1992? Yeah, 1992.
So did Karen Bass, right?
Karen Bass was 90. Karen Bass, I believe, was 92. 1992 was like. It was considered the year of the woman because so many women ran, but it was also a really big year for the Congressional Black Caucus. John Lewis was elected in 1992. So you had a lot of the CBC, which is why a lot of them are Clinton people. Right. So when it became Clinton versus Obama, the reason a lot of these people stuck with Hillary Clinton was that they were all Clinton people. They came in with Bill Clinton. And so Bill Clinton's election, because he had been, the first Democrat that had been elected since Jimmy Carter, when he won, that means it was a wave election. And even though there was a third party candidate, so he won, with less than 50% of the vote, it was just under 50%. He did come in with a lot of black people, but also a lot of women. And so they called it the year of the woman, and it was attached to that election because you just had so many people. Barbara Mikulski was elected that year, Dianne Feinstein, Barbara Boxer, Patty Murray, and Carol Moseley Braun, who became the first black woman senator, and who later ran for president.
Who people often forget she was one of the first black people in the Senate.
Well, she wasn't. I think she was
like
black
woman, right?
Right. I think she was the sixth. She might have been the sixth black person who was elected to the Senate, because by the time President Obama was elected to the Senate, he was only like the seventh or eighth. I think he might have been only the seventh black person ever elected to the Senate, and the first two black people ever elected were elected during Reconstruction.
Yeah, I was about to say
both
Reconstruction,
from Mississippi.
right?
Yeah, so you had two from Mississippi, and then you waited almost 100 years to get another black person in. But as far as black senators, I believe there have only been 9. Kamala Harris and Cory Booker being 2 of the 9. So there haven't even been that many black people. But I will say that 92 was considered a really revolutionary year because so many people won. So many women won. So the next big year of the woman was 2018, when you had a record number of women run for office, mainly in reaction to the continuing anger over Donald Trump winning the election, beating Hillary Clinton, and the way he comported himself as not just a candidate, but also as president in this really misogynistic, ugly way. I'm going to grab him by the beep, everything. He's got like almost 20, I think more than 20 people have accused him of sexual harassment or assault. And it just goes on and on and on. One who's actually accused him of rape. Like, it goes on and on and on, right? And so you have these reactions in the polity to these elections. And one of them was in 2018. And so, you had a lot of people come in who have then become like stars, right? You had the Squad. One of the, that's one of the things, right? That they came in and they were like the cool freshmen that came in and, and all that, which was important to have them, because they also are some of the best questioners. Like, the freshmen came in just badass, right?
Well, they're not brand new. They're from a new generation. So they just question authority, and that's how it should be done all the time.
And the difference between the 92 year of the women, and the 2018 year of the women is that the 2018 women were much younger, and they came in part by primarying some of the older Democrats who had actually been in those seats since the 90s. So that's a different kind of thing. You had you did have a lot of them who actually got elected in red districts where they knocked off a Republican, but some of them came in by primarying a Democrat. And so you have a much more progressive set of women, a much more liberal set of women, a set of women who are demanding change. A lot of them are millennials, so they're the children of Gen Xers. And so their attitude is, we need fundamental change in the system, right? So when you have Ayanna Pressley up there or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, they're not arguing for like tinkering with the system, right? They're arguing for like fundamental change. Ilhan Omar is not saying tinker with the system. She's saying full on change the system. These are women who are not afraid, even as a freshman, to go hard on the questioning, on when they interrogate much older Republicans.
Well, to be fair to the women of 92, I mean,
it was a different era.
The internet wasn't invented at the point, and nowadays, a person says something that's, really riveting, it can just spread around the world quickly.
Yeah. But no, it's true, absolutely. But I think about, these young women are just different. I'm saying, they're not better, they're just different.
You. I understand.
And so
totally.
it's just a different era. And I think the 90s also had a certain kind of politics where Democrats were still trying to be like, we're tough on crime, and they still had certain things they had to do in order to be acceptable, whereas these women don't give a damn about any of that. They don't care about that. They're just going to do what they're going to do. And, I think about the most recent incident when Ted Yoho, the congressman from Florida, who is, okay, let's say he's not like the brightest bulb in the fixture, literally called Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez out of her name, called her the B word, an effing B word, on the steps of the Capitol. And she went into the Capitol and gave a speech in which he gave a fake apology where instead of apologizing to her for calling her out of her name because he doesn't like her politics, he said, I would never call somebody that. I have daughters. I have a wife. And she basically got up there and gave a speech in which she said, that don't mean a damn thing. Just because you have daughters and a wife, don't use that as an excuse to try to say you would never do this, because the fact that you have daughters and a wife, including daughters that are like around my age, like barely older than me, means it's even worse. As she said, she has a father too. And you're acting like she doesn't have a family. She doesn't have a father that will be appalled by his daughter getting called the B word by another member of Congress. It's disrespectful to her as a member of Congress. It's disrespectful to her as a colleague. It's disrespectful to her as a woman. It's disrespectful, period.
It's disrespectful to her family members.
It's disrespectful to her daddy. It's disrespectful who's his age.
Rest in peace, her daddy, actually.
Right. And so she said, look, the reality is the fact that you would try to use your daughter and your wife
coward
as an excuse to be able to leverage yourself into a fake apology is despicable. And she gave this epic floor speech where she laid him out.
I think what it's called is she read him.
She read him for filth. She read him for filth, as they say on the Twitters, okay? And the reality is that he deserved it, and that you have these Republicans who don't respect women, period. They want to lock women up on the, birthing table as if it's like the 18th century. They don't want to give women choice. They want to control what women do with their bodies. They want to disrespect women. And then they get mad about the WAP video. It's like the WAP video is the worst thing they've ever seen. Really? Because I think the worst thing I've ever seen is a guy who's about to be president of the United States saying that he can freely grab women by the boop. That's the worst thing I've seen. And I'm quoting Tiffany Cross's tweet as I say that. Because the reality is, if you think that a fun video that's about women's sexuality is more offensive to you than the president of the United States having like 20-something accusers on sexual assault, including one woman who says that he raped her, who we've interviewed on TV, I think that's worse. And the culture is not being destroyed, right, because of women rappers. That's not what's destroying the culture. What's destroying the culture is the disrespect of women, is the disrespect of women even economically. Women are now they're calling this the woman's session. This recession that's beating up on the country because of COVID is disproportionately hitting women, the same way the previous recession under George W. Bush disproportionately hit men. Well, this one's hurting women because it's hurting service occupations, it's hurting retail occupations, jobs women have more. And by the way, beating up the postal service also disproportionately hurts women of color.
It also hurts women because they got their kids out of school.
And
and they got to think about daycare and all that stuff if they have to continue going to work, also plucking them chickens.
Plucking the chickens so that y'all can have a chicken sandwich. And so women are in these jobs disproportionately, women of color, black women, brown women, indigenous women, and also the fact that people are home and there's disproportionate, now you have increased numbers of domestic violence that are happening. So all of this, when you think about the catastrophe that Donald Trump is presiding over, he's presiding over a catastrophe for every American, but it's disproportionately hitting women and particularly women of color. And so, I think it's important for us to always keep in mind the compartmentalized pieces of the damage, right? The damage is not just to America, to our reputation, to our ability to travel. Canada said, please don't come over here. Canada was like, don't you try to come over here.
Now, when Canada say not to come over here, something is wrong.
They're gonna build a wall because they're like, stop trying to sneak over the Canadian border.
I'm not mad at them, though, truthfully.
They put out an official statement saying, stop trying to sneak over the Canadian border. We don't want you.
Not mad at them.
Y'all some COVID-ridden, disease-ridden Americans.
Stay over there. When y'all finish with whatever y'all decided to do over there, then we may think about it.
Europe please don't come over. Europe has us restricted. Like, don't come over here.
Nobody wants Americans anymore.
Nobody
they don't
wants
want anybody.
We are unwanted. wanted. But anyway, that's what we're going to do. But we have a really great guest on the show, on the podcast today to talk about that, because this is somebody who's been subjected to the hell of misogyny, of body shaming, of being outed on the internet, using your body to troll you, trended in the worst. I mean, she's been through it. And so let's bring her in. This is going to be a great interview. Let's bring her in. And joining me now is the author of a book called She Will Rise, Becoming a Warrior in the Battle for True Equality, former member of Congress, Katie Hill. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Of course. And so you wrote this book, and this is like one of the hardest things to do, is to write a memoir when you've been through a painful public experience. And it becomes the thing people know you for, which shouldn't be, right? Because you were a member of Congress, which in and of itself, elected in your 30s, very young, like the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, you get into Congress, and now what people know you for is a scandal.
Yeah.
So what made you take that moment, which I know had to have been incredibly painful, and say, I'm going to sit down and write about it?
Well, part of it was being able to take your own story back, right? And to be able to say, even if nobody ever read it, to be able to kind of come up with do the processing needed that you needed to do to kind of get through that, to work through the trauma, and to really say, okay, this is what happened. This is how it happened. These are the implications from it. This is how my experience is not just my own, but it's a universal one in so many ways. And this is the way that we can prevent it from happening to other women in the future. So for me, at least, I needed to be able to channel myself, my energy into something very quickly, or I think I would have gone crazy. And so working through the book was my way of doing that. And I think even before I started working on the book, it became very clear to me that I wanted this to be about the battles that we're facing to achieve equality. And my story is only an example.
And when this all happened, and for those of you who are not aware of it, you were subjected to what would be called revenge porn. That somebody, you allegedly your former husband, released pictures of you, salacious pictures that went all over Twitter, went viral, you trended, and you were accused of having an inappropriate relationship with a staffer. This outed you. I believe outed you that you are bisexual, and it became a whole meme. And so talk a little bit about, I hate that question. How did that make you feel? Like, that's the worst question in media. But I'm going to ask it anyway, because I am curious, how did you feel going through it? How did you get through it?
Yeah, well, it didn't out me as bisexual. I'd run openly as a bisexual woman, but I think that's a big part of what made the whole thing so much more salacious, was that it was a relationship with a woman. I also was married to my ex at the time, and so they were using this word throuple, which was new to the vernacular of most Americans, and I still think it's just this ridiculous word. But you're right. I had achieved a lot, and I feel like I'd already done a lot of good in my short time in Congress, and then suddenly to have those naked pictures that I was not, never consented to having shared and didn't even know were taken, where that's what I was known for, and for introducing the world to this new word it was disgusting. And having to see those pictures that they weren't even the flattering ones that you'd take of yourself to send to your potential lover or whatever, the person you're trying to seduce through pictures. They're just ugly ones, and they're ones that you're confronted with every single day in every single Twitter post. You're just popping up over and over and over again. And they say, I've talked openly about my suicide attempt afterwards, and they say that we think of rape as obviously one of the most horrible experiences somebody could go through. But about a third of women after rape contemplate suicide. When we're talking about cyber exploitation, more than half of women contemplate suicide in the aftermath. And so I think that there's something about that public shaming element, something about the fact that you can't escape it, that it doesn't ever really go away. Nothing ever is truly gone off of the internet. That makes it, in a lot of ways, I never want to say worse, but it makes it it drags it out so much more, and it makes it so much more of a public kind of experience than what you would, go through otherwise. So it was, it was awful. It caused me to really consider ending my life because I didn't see another way out of it. And that is a big part of what led to my resignation too.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing about it is, so there are two pieces. One of them is that social media has made everything that an individual person could go through much worse, right? So bullying is worse because you can bully somebody and then enhance the bullying through social media. The kind of misogyny that I'm sure you faced even before this, just as a woman in public life, that just being a woman in public means that anyone on Twitter feels like they can get at you. They can make fun of you. They can talk about your looks. They can sexualize you. They can do anything they want to you because now you're a thing on Twitter that they can attack. And that's every single woman in public life. We've all dealt with it. And so the misogyny aspect of it, the bullying aspect of it, it's like amplified by social media. Do you feel like 100%. Had this happened in the age before there was a Twitter, that it might have been different?
Oh, I think so, for sure. I mean, it wouldn't have been able to get the life that it got because also I think that, the publications, the publications that really were spreading this were largely online, and that, none of the classy or well-respected publications would even in a million years consider publishing those photos. So I think that, there's no way that it would have taken the same trajectory. That's not to say that the facts wouldn't be reported or that, the fact that there were photos wouldn't be reported, but that's so different from exposing somebody's body with images that were, and I don't care who they are. I don't think that should be something that we allow as a society, regardless of the situation.
Well, and I think, when this all happened, I think for a lot of women, you kind of became the symbol of the utter hypocrisy of the right because, it was more sort of conservative outlets and right-wingers who really went after you, but they countenance Donald Trump, the grab the P-word guy. Did that... I mean, did that even figure in? Because when you're in that moment, you're really thinking about, oh my God, this is happening to me. I'm sure you're not thinking about politics, but did you, in sort of retrospect, really sit down and think, oh my God, the people attacking me are like utter hypocrites?
Oh, I mean, that was happening from the very beginning. I was, of course, thinking about what I was dealing with and having to kind of face my own, grappling with, like, I don't want to be seen or be a hypocrite about, the Me Too issues. And I recognize the mistakes that I made. And so, I really, and I didn't want to be used as a weapon against my former colleagues. And, so the decision was a difficult one, but I ultimately felt like it was the right one to make at the time. But I think that, the entire time, everyone that I was talking to, as I was looking at it myself, I'm like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna end up resigning. But freaking Trump is so much worse. I mean, so much worse. Like there are actual victims in his case, and a lot of them, and there's no one even cares. And it's so ironic to me that the right wingers who are suddenly on this whole, she's a predator bandwagon, didn't think that Kavanaugh was, didn't think that Trump was. But yeah, you're right. It is a symbol of the hypocrisy, and so interesting that they're going after me as a woman on it, almost harder than Joe Biden with the Tara Reid stuff. And I find that interesting too. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, well, these are the same people that, objectify women, but are aghast at the WAP video. Like, how dare there be that video, right? They're like, oh my God, this is a moral outrage. And they're probably saving it on their phone so they can watch it over and over.
Yeah, exactly. For, what, later.
Yeah, I mean, come on. So, I mean, I wonder if, do you write about your colleagues? Because I am curious, we have more women with political power than we ever had. I mean, the fact that you were even elected, from California at such a young age. Were your colleagues supportive of you, your female colleagues, particularly in Congress?
Yeah, they were really supportive. They were huge, lifelines for me, and the supportive texts that I was getting and the phone calls. And, I was not able to take a lot of them just because I was just so overwhelmed and it was hard for me to even know what to say to people. But yes, they were incredibly supportive. one thing that was difficult for me and that I write about in the book is that there was a very small number of them who were able to say something publicly in my defense. And I understand that, especially for the people who are running, who, had these tough races, who are representing these seats that had been previously held by Republicans. And it was a big reason that I decided to quit too, because I didn't want to be the, something that they were constantly asked about where, what do you think about Katie Hill? And do you disavow her? Do you whatever? I didn't want them to have to be put in that position of either defending me and possibly putting their own, political stakes in jeopardy, or saying that they or not standing with me anymore, right? So I really appreciate the people who did vocally stand up for me. But it's a small number, and notably the number it's from people primarily who are in seats that are very safe blue, and it shows you just the partisan aspect of this.
And the subhead of your book is Becoming a Warrior in the Battle for True Equality, and I want you to talk a little bit about that, how you emerged from, as you said, thinking about taking your own life and being sort of at the bottom. Look, it is no fun to trend for negative reasons. I can tell you that personally from as well.
Sure.
And that it's hard to even climb out of bed at a certain point. But once you climbed out of bed and decided, okay, I'm going to do something, with myself and with this whatever name recognition, however I got it. Talk about that journey and what does that mean, becoming a warrior in the battle for true equality?
Yeah. So, the journey for me was, it was again saying, okay, I'm not done with whatever I have to contribute to the world. I refuse to accept that, at 32, my whole life is finished. I felt like I had too much left to do, and that I'd set out to try and make change in the world, and that I still had the capacity to do that. It was just it was clearly going to take a different form than I thought. And that was okay, because I didn't ever expect to, run for office or make it into office in the first place. So, this was a shift in direction, but I needed it to be impactful. And clearly my story, and this is what I learned, probably the most from my, the op-ed that I did in the New York Times shortly after my resignation, where I talked about, contemplating suicide. The reaction that I had from people because of that article was so overwhelming. Like, I've been there, your story really means something to me. You standing up and you continuing to be brave is just so, it's so important to me and to other women. And so I thought about it, and I really did think that my experience here and the other experiences that I've had with, sexual assault and domestic abuse and everything else that I outline in the book are not just mine. They're, what I think is appealing about them to people. The reason that they resonate with people is because there's a universality to it all, that women of all ages and races and every socioeconomic, part of life have experienced on a daily basis. And so I think that, taking a step back, saying, what do my experiences exemplify? How do we take that as a whole and say, where are we in this journey for getting to equality? 100 years after, white women were given the right to vote, what does this mean for us? And have we gone far enough? And I think the answer is absolutely not. But what's it going to take for us to get there? And when we talk about becoming warriors, pretty much the argument that I make is that we all are already, and we need to be channeling that into the fight.
Well, I mean, I feel like your final speech that you gave as a member of Congress, I think, was the start of that. I mean, you may have still been in a difficult place, but you spoke, sister. You came out there and said, "I'm gonna say these words," and you seem so strong. I think, I think for a lot of people, it's important to read, the book from the standpoint of, that it wasn't so easy, because you definitely got up there and were so strong, and I think for a lot of people, really empowering. So. Were you ever have you been able to confront your ex husband in this whole mess of a situation?
No, he actually won't even sign the papers for me to become officially divorced. So I am, I'm not trying to reach out to him. Don't get me wrong. Any communications through lawyers, but yeah, he won't sign the papers. So the court date that I had was moved back because of COVID, and then it was moved back again because of COVID. So, right now I'm just basically stuck married to this guy, and I can't tell you how much that bothers me every single day.
I mean, the thing about it is that's so insane is that, you know, what happened to you kind of, it harkens back to some of the old bad tropes of what it means to be a woman in the world, where, as you said, you're powerless to get out of a marriage, right? Even though you would think in the 21st century, you don't have to stay married to somebody you don't want to be married to, right? You're shamed and body shamed in public. You know, I almost think about it as like Cersei. I don't know if you're a Game of Thrones person, but that's
yes, I am.
Right, where Cersei Lannister.
Totally.
And when this happened to you, I thought about that, right? I mean, it's like this is.
I did too.
Right? Okay, thank you. I'm not alone.
Yeah.
I thought about that.
No.
I'm like. You know, they are treating Katie Hill as Cersei Lannister.
Yeah. No, I 100% resonated with that. And I think that you're absolutely right. There are elements of this where, you know, I feel like I should be as empowered and as free as anybody, but I'm still powerless to get out of this marriage because of the way that the court system works, and because of, you know, the fact that I think what is really telling about a man is when, you know, with something like revenge porn or cyber exploitation, they're using that as a way of maintaining power. They're using refusing to sign court documents as a way of maintaining power. There's when they've lost any other way of doing it, which is, you know, the case with my ex. He had power and control over me for 15 years, every single day, and now he doesn't. And once he lost it. Once I left him was when he decided that he was going to use those images. And then, you know, now he doesn't have anything else left. And so he's refusing to get divorced from me. So, and I know that he's going to try other things. Like I just have that awareness that no matter what happens, you know, he's going to be around and is certainly going to have motivation to continue to try and control me and to try and ruin my life. But that's part of the defiance with it all, is me saying, well, screw you, no.
Yeah. And I'm going to write a book. How about that? And tell my story.
We are and you know, in the divorce, I think that's part of why he's not signing, because he wants to get a chunk of that money. So, you know.
Come on, Cletus. You need to stop. Let me ask you this. You know, in trying to just sort of bring this to a close, is we are in the centennial of the 19th Amendment becoming law, in which, as you said, white women were given the power of the vote, which I always love to know. When I used to teach a class, I used to note to my students that, you know, the men who founded this country sure did hate black people, but they seem to have hated their wives and their daughters more, because 50 years, it took them 50 additional years to give their own wives, to give the wives and daughters, right, of white men the power to vote, than even
Isn't
giving
that
black
bizarre?
men. Yeah, black men got the vote 50 years before white women. It's technically on paper.
I know.
On paper.
Yeah, of course they were on paper, right? But no, I think that's wild.
Yeah, and if you think about it, during the whole fight for women having the right to vote, I mean, we forget women were jailed, women were beaten, women were also, and this is what connects to your story for me, is that one of the things that was done to suffragettes was to humiliate them and to bodily humiliate them, to say suffragettes are women who can't find a husband, who are hideous and who are ugly, and they would do these ugly caricatures of them to say that this is the only, you know, they've got like warts all over their faces, and, you know, so it's a bit ironic to me. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. And I think it shows you that since forever, men have just been afraid of women having power. And I was just looking at some of those cartoons, the anti-suffrage cartoons, and you're just looking at this, like that it was somehow emasculating for your wife to be able to vote, or that you were going to be, because she's going to vote, you're going to be the one who's, you know, stuck with the kids and doing the laundry. And it was just like these bizarre things. But yeah, the bodily humiliation it's just one of so many tactics that are used to degrade women, and to try and take power in whatever way possible. And in our bodies and our appearances, that's something that, unfortunately, because of our own socialization, it hits hard. It, you know, even, and this is something that I hate about, you know, my own reactions. I can't, with the pictures, you know, some of the comments that people say that are like about me being ugly or fat or whatever, those comments get to me more than even, you know, some of the other stuff. So, and I'm like, that shouldn't bother me, but it does. And, you know, I think that's just one of the things that we're stuck dealing with too.
No, 100%. And I think because there's something about the way that women are socialized, even in the 21st century, that cause us to not take back the power from that. You know what I mean? That it can't. The fact that it can still get to us, and especially you're a millennial. As a young woman in the 21st century, the fact that still hits the way it does say something about the way we're still socialized. Yeah.
Totally. And the fact that we get ready. I talk about this in the book, right? Like we spend so much time getting ready. We've got this curated, appearance. And I think that, part of my philosophy on it is like, well, I'm choosing to do this and I'm choosing to look the way that I do. But we know that like, I would much rather not, right? I don't want to be wearing makeup. I would much rather just be putting my hair up in a ponytail and not think about it. But the way that you looked changes the way that you're perceived. And in a time like this, then that matters. If you're trying to sell books, if you're trying to run for office, if you're trying to, be promoted at work. And I think that's a really unfortunate thing and something we need to push back on too. And I haven't quite figured out, the best way to do that yet.
Well, I did put on a little bit of makeup because we do a video part of the podcast, but in homage, I put on my Sophia Chang, the baddest bitch in the room shirt.
I love that. I saw that.
Sophia Chang.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and
I need to get one of those.
We're going to have her on the show eventually, but I was like, you know what I'm going to put on for my Katie Hill interview? Perfect. I'm going for the baddest bitch in the room shirt. I'm doing it.
Thank you. I'm going to get one.
You know what? I will make sure that you get one. I will have one sent to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So here's my final question to you, because I think this is the most important thing. Because of the subtitle of your book, Becoming a Warrior in the Battle for True Equality, tell me what is next for you. What is going to be the next chapter for you, Katie?
Yeah. The biggest thing for me is really leaning into the pack that I started. It's called Her Time, and it's about supporting women, young women of color, especially, who are, kind of these long shot candidates that need an extra boost, but who are the future leaders of our country that we want to elevate into positions of power and who can make a difference. And so Her Time has a few different angles that we're approaching this from, in terms of approaching the shift in power. One of them is through supporting these candidates. The next is through actually figuring out and doing research around this to figure out what it is going to take to mobilize young women as voters, 18 to 40-year-olds as a voting bloc, because I think that we have so much power there, untapped potential. And then the third is advocating for these legislative solutions that are outlined in the book and that are kind of the premise of what I think is the feminist agenda that we need. So, I think that starting an organization, organizational development, working on this advocacy, that's all stuff that I feel, really at home in. That was my career pretty much before I ran for Congress. And now I have all these relationships and connections and, an inside view into how this all works. And I think I can use that for, in a positive way. And I'm excited to do that.
I love it. Katie Hill, the book is She Will Rise, Becoming a Warrior in the Battle for True Equality. Y'all have not heard the last from Katie Hill, because I have a feeling that you have a lot more to say and to do. I love the idea that you have a PAC that's going to be supporting, and I love the intersectionality of it. I'm a fan. Katie Hill, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here. And
thank you. Great to see you.
All right. Thank you very much. This was a great interview.
Wow.
She will rise. I mean, Katie Hill's a brave young woman.
Wow.
God bless her, former congressional representative Katie Hill.
Wow.
But who still has a lot to say and still has a lot of potential. And I think that she's going to be great.
See, the funny thing about it, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, I said the difference between women of 92 and now is the internet. Now, I'm sure women of 92 prefer the fact that they came out in 92.
It's very true.
So
they
what
didn't
she
have to
just
deal with that.
described is awful.
It's awful. It's awful what happened to her. It's awful what her ex did to her. It's awful. The whole thing is awful. But the fact that she was able to write it down and put it into words.
Regain her power
and tell her story and own her story. God bless her. So everybody should read that book, She Will Rise. And also what you should do is you should subscribe to this podcast, What
Definitely
to Read.
Do that. Hit that notification bell.
Hit the notification. Give us a subscription. You can subscribe either on YouTube. You can also subscribe on Libsyn. You can subscribe on...
They can download the whole thing on those podcast channels.
Download Go and do a whole review.
Make a library of what to read. Exactly.
Yeah, binge it.
Just binge it. It's like, 17 episodes out there?
Binge it. You know what? You need to binge. Binge is good for you. It's good for your soul. You can also subscribe on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. And so we'll see you guys on the next What to Read. But for now, I am inspired.